Well, welcome everybody. We're going to get started at the top of the hour. We're so glad that you're joining us for Hot Topics. Our topic today is consolidating financial statements with Intacct's core financials and also our three highlights. So I'm going to turn it over to our presenter, Mark Joseph, who will introduce himself.
Thank you, Dawn. My name is Mark Joseph, and I am in my 10th year now at LBMC. I just wrapped up 9 years last month. So this is one of my favorite topics, financial reporting in Intacct. And that's all I've done for 9 years is Intacct. So I'm happy to be your presenter today. Glad you're here.
Great. I have a few housekeeping notes for everybody. Mark has let me know that he has a lot of content to go through. So if you have a question, please find the Q&A function and enter your question in there. And then at the end of the segment, I'll be sure to ask your questions to Mark. Also, if we have any of LBMC Tech consultants who are participating today and you know the answer to those questions, feel free to answer those in the Q&A. And to all of our audience members, don't be shy. Please, we love to be able to provide you with the answers. The second thing is, if you are here today and you're looking to earn CPE credits, if we could go back to the housekeeping.
Sorry about that.
No problem. If you're here for CPE, just remember that all poll questions must be answered. It's our way of verifying to NASBA your participation. Then, following the webinar, you're going to receive at least one, maybe two emails. The first email will be coming from me, and it will contain slides, a recording, and a link to a survey. And that will be within 48 hours of Mark's presentation today. The second email that you'll get will not be coming from me. It will be coming from one of our sister company, which is an accounting firm. And that will be your CPE certificate. And they ask that you allow up to 2 weeks. Now, if you don't receive it within 2 weeks, please give me a holler at the email right there, and I will track that down for you. I'll check my report, verify that you've answered all of the poll questions, and then get back to our accounting department. And speaking of poll questions, we're gonna do our first poll question right now. All right, we are midway through August, and I wanted to ask you guys, what's the best thing about this time of year? We're getting close to a Labor Day weekend. Kids are back at school. College football is kicking off. But there's also still plenty of summer left, depending on where you live, or maybe there's something else that you find nice about this time of year. And I will give you a few more minutes, not minutes, moments here, and then I'm going to close down the poll. All right, closing it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the big winner is college football, everyone. So, and Mark, it's all yours.
Okay. I'm going to turn my video off just to make sure I'm preserving the bandwidth here. Okay, so today's agenda, you probably saw it in your invitation email. We're going to make sure that by the end of today, you understand the importance of the unique inter-entity accounts. By the way, the topic is consolidating financial statements. I forgot to say that. So consolidating financial statements. And then learning how to create user-defined books to hold the eliminating entries that go with consolidating financial statements. Understanding the purpose of that eliminating entries offset account, and learning how to create these multi-level consolidating financial statements. So while we're talking about multi-level consolidating financial statements, I want to jump into the system briefly just to show you what you have out of the box, a predefined report. I'm going to navigate to the financial reports here. So you'll see, I think at least one, maybe two predefined reports that have this by location terminology in the title of the report. And so what does that look like? In this demo environment, I have set up 8 entities. And so that by location report is showing, it's a report that's defined to be the columns are an expanded dimension, the location dimension. So you'll see each of the 8 entities now showing up in its own separate column. Okay. Now, I'm guilty of describing this as a consolidated financial statement. I'm trying to retrain myself into defining this as a combined financial statement, because when you hear the word consolidated, you need to think of a GAAP financial statement. It implies that there's going to be a column near the far right that shows all of the eliminating entries to eliminate that activity, all those transactions that are taking place between your entities. So in a GAAP financial statement, those get eliminated so that what's left is the operation of your consolidated enterprise, if you will, with the outside world. So this is more of what I would call a combined financial statement. It's a column that's cross-footing each individual location's results of operations there. So that's out of the box. So what we're going to talk about today is, which does not come out of the box, how do we get that elimination column there, the eliminating entries? We want to present those all by themselves, these eliminating entries. And you might be aware that there are consolidation modules available to you from Intacct that automate this entire process, identifying those inter-entity balances and preparing the eliminating entries for you, and then providing you a consolidation reporting book. So without those modules that automate all of that, you still can generate reports like this, where you have, in this case, what Domestic does is it's a single level or one level where you have, I'm consolidating 7 entities, by the way, out of the 8. So I've got 7 entities in columns, and then an eliminating entries column, and then the consolidated column. Advanced ownership consolidation is a rather new module. This would be the module that would be required if you need these columns to represent the consolidated totals of other consolidations. I kind of think of it as a group of single level consolidations just being rolled up into a new top level row here. So you can see my color coding here. If I have a single level consolidation involving entities 101 and 102 rolling up into 100, and then some eliminating entries just for that consolidation, and then that total then becomes the figures that you see in the first column. Same goes here, 201 and 202 rolling up into 200. So Domestic cannot do this, and I think we've had some experience where some of our customers are finding that out, and so we're having to change the direction for the automation piece. So these are gradually more expensive with more complexity. So what does that look like in the environment? So here's that. This would be the Domestic way of looking at it. With those same 7 entities, you have the 7 entities here, and then that eliminating entries column, and then consolidated. And here's the multi-level, where you have fewer columns because some of those entities have been consolidated already. And you'll notice the headings here, 100 to 199. I've created these entity groups so that they can be populated dynamically. If you assign an ID to a new entity within that range, they will automatically get picked up in the consolidation, which is kind of cool. And then you'll have top level, I guess is a way to describe the eliminating entries between these 3 columns, groups of entities there. So that's kind of our end goal, is to be able to accommodate this type of a reporting requirement. Take us back into the slides again. So not everyone may know this, but the eliminating entries can be recorded in a user-defined book. That's what I'm going to show you today. It doesn't require an eliminating entry, which costs you money. Did I say entry? Eliminating entities is what I meant to say. So each entity has a impact on your invoice. So with the use of a user-defined book, we can accomplish the same objective here as far as presenting eliminating entries. Now, if you were present at my 2019 presentation, then you might remember this slide. So in the general ledger configuration, we see all of these different kinds of books. So you probably have an accrual book. My demo environment is cash and accrual. And then in that configuration, you'll see some reference to a GAAP book and a tax book. And then down at the bottom of that configuration screen, you'll see user-defined book. So these are just ways to segregate transactions. And at the time you run reports, you can choose whether or not to run reports on just one book or one or more books. You just make that choice when you're running the reports. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to get a user-defined book set up in the system. I'm going to navigate to the GL configuration here. And at the top, you'll see that my main reporting book in this demo environment is accrual and cash. You'll see that we have enabled a GAAP book and we have enabled a tax book here. And then at the very bottom, this will be where you go to enable the ability to create user-defined books. And that's in the very last section of settings down here at the very bottom, advanced GL options. So you check that box and save. By the way, some might say, well, aren't eliminating entries, wouldn't those be posted to a GAAP book? And the answer is yes, unless you need to present eliminating entries in a separate column. You don't want to commingle eliminating entries with other audit adjustments that get you to GAAP compliant financial reports. So we elect then to create a consolidation book as a user-defined book. So when you turn this on, this functionality, the next thing to do is to go to the permissions. There'll be 3 rows of new permissions that you'll notice. So I'm going to navigate to my external user here to show you that. Subscriptions, and these are GL permissions, by the way. And I like to search for those with my user-defined search here. So the first row is called user-defined journal entries. That's the permissions that you'll need to turn on there. Then you have user-defined books, those permissions, and user-defined journals. So those are 3 new rows that you'll see when you turn on that functionality. And so after you have done that step, you're ready to go create in General Ledger under the Setup tab a user-defined book. Okay, there's not much to this. It's rather simple. Um, I created these four. Um, this zero CB consolidation book 000, that's what I'm referring to as that top level consolidation, which would be the range that includes all of the entities. Then I've got three second level consolidations, I'll say. I've got a consolidation for the 100 entity IDs, the 200s, and the 300s. And so there's not much to a consolidation book. You're just creating an ID that can be anything you want it to be to keep track. And given it a description, this is my description I used here. And what this box does right here is to you can make a choice on whether or not you want the transactions recorded in this book to be subject to the month-end close, the close books functionality. So if you check this box, you're going to be able to post to this book regardless of whether or not the period is closed. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about another checkbox that I'm going to propose in the community as an idea. I want there to be an opportunity here to allow entries in the user-defined book. Remember, user-defined book entries are separate and apart from your accrual book. And I would love for the system to allow you to post transactions to these user-defined books that are not subject to the restrictions for journal entries posting directly to a GL account. And we do recommend that for control accounts. We don't want journal entries in control accounts for fear that that might cause your subledger detail to get out of sync with your GL control account balance. So I just felt like a user-defined books should have the option of whether or not to be subject to that restriction, because it's really not impacting your accrual book at all, which is what your subledger is going to be supporting. So that's a user-defined book. Once you've got your books created, by the way, I'll just say this too. Intacct recommends as a best practice that you create a separate consolidation book for each consolidation that you are needing to report on. So that's why there's four here. I've got the ability to report on all four of these consolidations. So for each book, you will also create a journal. So I'm calling the journals the eliminating entries journal, and there's a separate journal for each of those consolidation books. You can see that to which book that they're linked to here. So that's the first three steps in setting your system up to generate consolidating financial statements. Oh, question number 2.
All right. This poll question might seem like it's coming out of left field, but I have a very specific reason for asking. Is your organization planning any construction projects? Yes, before the end of the year. Yes, we'll start in 2025. And then understand that you might not know what the construction projects might be for your organization. But the reason that I bring it up is that we are relaunching our construction and real estate with Sage Intacct, and have brought on a very dynamic and her name is Misty Palick, and she has deep knowledge in construction and real estate. And so just a little bit of a plug there for what we have to offer on the construction and real estate side. And what we discovered is that a lot of healthcare organizations, higher ed, you they're not necessarily a construction company that has construction projects. So give this a few more moments. And we've got a few people that are either going to be starting before the end of the year or kicking off next year. So great. Mark, it's back to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, on the next slide, we're going to talk about the rest of the steps here. So we've already covered these first three. We've turned on the functionality and we've created 4 consolidation books, each with its own eliminating entries journal. So we covered those first 3. The rest of these steps are going to be pretty consistent to the procedures that you will follow to configure, if you will, the consolidation modules. So there's 2 key points, and that is for each consolidation, you just have to identify which entities it is that you're consolidating. So we'll take a look at that. And then you identify all of the GL accounts in which you are tracking the activity that is going on between those entities that you have defined. So I think most of you will recall that in the system, if you're in a multi-entity shared environment, there is a table, the inter-entity account mapping table. And so that table will be half, I guess, of the GL accounts that you need to identify. And then if your consolidation also involves eliminating P&L transactions between entities, then you will have some GL accounts down the P&L area of your chart of accounts. And then we want to talk about this eliminating entries offset account, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I just mentioned the inter-entity account mapping table, so I want to have a brief discussion about the importance of what you see on that mapping table. And then optionally, if you have, or if you want to track between entities where one entity is actually using the AR module to create an invoice to send to its other entity, then I'll show you a way that you can use the AR module and the AP module on the flip side of that transaction, and keep that activity tracked in such a way that it's easy to eliminate. And then I'm sure most of y'all, if not everyone, has experience in creating the financial statements themselves. So we'll just focus on these 3 steps that are tabbed in the left margin in the financial report writer: rows, columns, and filters. And then at the very end, then I'm going to show you a really neat tip to very quickly get into the system by way of import template, a general ledger journal entries import template. Bring in all of the eliminating entries all at once. Okay, so I'm going to take you now to some templates here. I just felt like this was the easiest way to present the information. So this first template here is the template that you would use to import your entities. For most of y'all, I'm sure this was way back when you might have hired us to implement the system for you, so you might remember these templates. But this is where I want to show that we're going to have multi-level consolidations going on here. We're going to begin with single level consolidations of these 3 entities. It's like 101 and 102 will roll up into 100 and so on. I don't have a 301 and 302 yet in the system, but those would be picked up automatically by my dynamic dimension groups if we did add 301 and 302 later. I've got 901 down here, another entity that we're not going to be including in the consolidation. I just wanted to make the point here that we often get asked what happens when an entity that's not currently consolidated at some future date is consolidated. And so the way I respond to that question is I recommend that at whatever month that consolidation requirement exists, I recommend then, let's just assume that it's a 301. It's a company that will consolidate into 300. I recommend having a cutover between 901 to an entity 301. And then that way you can combine with a location group 301 and 901 to report historically on that entity that was not previously consolidated, but now is. So you can report on that entity separately. But then also, as of that effective month, it will be included in a consolidation of that 300 series of IDs. So that's what I would do if it were me. So we've got a total of 8 entities in our demo environment, 7 of which will be included in a multi-level consolidating financial statement. Before I go to the chart of accounts import template, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that mapping table. There's 4 scenarios here, and this is important because only 2 scenarios will actually work in the context of being able to generate a consolidating financial statement. These first 2 scenarios will not get you there. You won't be able to generate a consolidating financial statement. So this first tab, and there may be some of you that do it this way, and I understand why you have just the one GL account. It's usually an account that might be titled enter entity due from /2. It's just going to be an account that has in it all of the inter-entity transactions. Okay. Why won't that work? Because what we need to be able to do for the eliminating entries column, we need to be able to isolate a balance of transaction activity between 2 specific entities here. So when you have just one GL account, you're able to filter for the location that is tagged on the transactions in the account, but you're not able to filter for the other entity that's involved. Okay. So when you're using just one due from to account, it's going to be a one single row. It can be in the asset section or the liability section, and it's going to crossfoot to 0. And that's what some people want. They just want an automatic elimination of all inter-entity transactions on one row that has a 0 balance. So I understand the principle there. But if you need the ability to produce from Intacct a GAAP consolidating financial statement, this will not work. This won't work either, where you might say, okay, what about if we had a unique due from account and a unique due to account? That still won't work because we haven't accomplished that other requirement to be able to filter for the second entity in this pair of entities. We can filter for the transactions that are tagged with a specific location. That's one side of the entry or the relationship, but we're still not able to filter for the other entity to be able to isolate a balance between those 2. So this won't work either. So Intacct recommends at a best practice, by the way, that's just 2 GL accounts. a best practice for a system that has 8 entities would require 112 GL accounts. So it's for that reason you can tell already that exponentially that's going to be a list that grows mightily with more and more entities that come into the system. But what Intacct is saying here, the reason it's a best practice is that you can very easily see one GL account has a balance that exactly agrees to the balance on the other entities books. So I'm using Intacct sub-account functionality, a 3-digit maximum here or capacity. This works well. It allows me to have one main account number, 1400 for the receivable and 2400 for the payable. But then I can use sub-accounts to identify the 2 entities that are involved. So all the transactions in that one unique account relates only to those 2 entities. So there you go. That accomplishes the requirement to be able to isolate transaction activity between 2 specific entities. Okay. So that's 2 of the, I think you're given 5 3-digit segments of capability there with that functionality. So here's kind of the compromise. This is the one I recommend. Well, it just has to be a minimum requirement. And so instead of 112 unique GL accounts, you can get by with 16 in an environment where there's 8 entities. And so what you have there is you have a unique inter-entity receivable that's identified with each entity. So you'll see I've got each of these receivables is attached to a specific entity and each payable as well. So that gets you to 16 GL accounts instead of 112. So we're still meeting the requirement. We have 2 entities. Remember, the transactions are tagged with a location. So that's one side. That's one of the pair of entities. But now the other entity we can filter for because the GL account is attached to the other entity. So now we have, with just 16 accounts, we have the ability to isolate transaction activity between 2 entities. So at a minimum, this is what we need, and that's what you'll see in my chart of accounts. So let's go to that chart of accounts now. So here you go. These are the accounts we were just talking about here. Due from and due to. So those are your, those are your intercompany receivables and intercompany payables. And then I just included these cash accounts up here just to show you how you could also use that sub account to attach a bank account to an entity, right? Who owns that bank account? You can use the sub account for that purpose as well. Here are the GL accounts. We had talked about what if an entity is creating a customer invoice to another entity. So these are GL accounts. They're optional. This is what I would do if that were the situation where you're creating a customer invoice and a related vendor bill on the other entity's books. I would include in my list of inter-entity accounts these unique control accounts. And you can identify those in the system by this setting here. This is where you can say these AR accounts are alternative control accounts for accounts receivable. The R is accounts receivable. And down here are the alternative control accounts for accounts payable. And so each customer that you set up that's attached to an entity, you can store in that record these unique control accounts. So every invoice would be tracked in that unique alternative control account and segregated from the main control account that you have identified in the configuration of those two modules, AR and AP. Okay. And there are other interentity accounts. I'm just touching on just a few here. I've got some income accounts that I'm just naming. This obviously won't be the name of your accounts, but just for ease of understanding here. Income accounts begin with number 4, right? So I've got by entity, I've got revenue or income accounts. I'm just saying I'm going to track all sales to entity 100 in main account 4,000, but the sub account 100. Okay, so those are income accounts. And these expense accounts, same thing. I'm buying from an entity. So main account 5,000 and the sub account is attached to each of the entities that we're buying from. Okay. So every other income and expense account that does not have that sub account ID there would be where you would track all transactions with the outside world. Okay. This is the minimum requirement for the mapping table. So this is just the interentity accounts that are balance sheet type. This is what your customers would look like here. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the ID of the customer. I'm going to override that document sequencer by doing this. So C, customer 100. So that would be a customer record for entity 100, right? And on that record, you can store the default revenue account. So I've got those same revenue accounts identified with the customer. So customer 100 is revenue account 100. And the control account, that alternative control account, 1100.100. So that's consistently done for all 8 entities. Same goes with the vendor V, vendors, okay. Here you can default the expense account in the record. You can override that at the time of bill entry if you need to, but this kind of gives you a head start. Each attached with a sub account to the entity ID. And then those alternate control accounts for accounts payable that have a sub account matching up to the entity ID there. So very consistent, very easy to follow. Okay. And then we're going to, so you might remember from the that second slide, we've got some account groups we want to look at. Now there are there are 2 import templates for very quickly bringing account groups into the system. Remember, it's the account groups that build the row structure of the consolidating financial statement. I'm going to jump over to the second of 2 just to give you an idea. So in the system, I've created reports that have both the balance sheet and the income statement, so we can easily see how those support each other. And this is, as a matter of fact, my last presentation was on these templates. You might remember that presentation as well. So this will minimize quite a bit the amount of time it takes to create your financial report if you can bring your account groups in by template. This is very concise. Your reports will have many more lines of detail, I'm sure. Kind of get a feel, though, for the format that's required for the import template. Okay. Let me go into the system now. So the account groups is the rows. The dimension groups will help us to do 2 things. We need to filter the report globally to just include the entities that we are consolidating. So I've got some dimension groups for that location dimension set up. And let me just show you what I'm doing here. So this is the all members way of populating a dimension group. So as long as the ID of the location meets this criteria, it will automatically be populated in this group. So we're wanting all entities from 100 to 199. And that's consistently the way these other two are done. The top level group will be all of the entities from 100 to 399. So that's that top level. By the way, when you have this kind of a structure for the all members, you need a condition, 1 or 2 or 3. So that's how that works. So now that I created those location groups, I don't have to touch them ever again. That I'm done with that task. That's a one and done scenario. We also need to take a look. I forgot to mention, when you create these, you'll check the dimension structure box. We'll need that for the column definition on the multi-level report. Let's take a look at those location structures. Okay. So these three, 100 to 199, 200 to 299, and 300 to 399, those three were created automatically by checking that box I just showed you when creating the group. Now this one here, I created from this screen. I wanted to customize the location report structure to be a hierarchy of location groups. Think of it as you know how you have group of account groups as one of your structures that are available to you when you create an account group. This is a dimension group, so you kind of have the same opportunity here to create a group of location groups. The reason I wanted to do this is so that I can accomplish that top level consolidating financial statement where these three entity groups become individual columns on that top level consolidation. So that's the purpose there. And don't forget, you can always validate the groups that are in there by clicking members. Make sure that's getting the group that you're after. Okay. That pretty much gets us all we need, but I want to talk to you now about the tip. So just briefly, I want to show you those reports that we have so far in the system. Again, this is the report that domestic consolidation will be able to produce. No eliminating entries yet in the system. Okay. 7 entities to consolidate in a single level consolidation. Multi-level. No eliminating entries here. So where did this activity come from? I just wanted to share with you. I didn't have much history in here. I had to kind of create it so that this presentation would work. So the kinds of transactions you're seeing that are creating those inter-entity balances would be some that you're familiar with. So in my scenario, I'm relying on entity 300. It's kind of like a management company, if you will. So entity 300 is responsible for running the payroll. I'm just making these assumptions here. running the payroll for all other entities, including itself. And so that journal entry, the payroll journal entry, is getting cross-coded. Okay. So you can see multiple entity IDs are involved here. And for each of these individual entities to have a balanced journal entry, we rely on this entry here. So what we're telling Intacct is base the account numbers that you'll need to use to post to make each individual entity's payroll entry balance. Go look at the enter entity account mapping table based on 300. 300's relationship with all of these other entities. So I can cross code a journal entry. I'm hitting the salary and wages account and the payroll taxes expense account one entity at a time, but there will automatically be created a due to 300 to make that entry balance. And on 300's books, there'll be a due from each individual entity. So that's a payroll entry. You'll see on the AR invoice where I'm letting entity 300 invoice entities 100 and entities 200 for a management fee. And then these two entities, 100 and 200, are then turning right around and allocating that management fee to the entities involved in its own consolidation. So that creates some inter-entity balance there as well. Got several AR invoices here that I created. So here we've got 100 that's creating an invoice to entity 102, 201 invoicing entity 202. Here's an entity that's not getting consolidated, invoicing an entity that is. So that's that would be a transaction with an outside party, if you will, in terms of a consolidation. And so on. There's that. There's those two invoices for the management fee to 100 and 200. So there you go. So for every invoice to an entity that's being consolidated, I'm creating a bill, an AP bill. So you see those getting booked on the flip side as a vendor bill. Okay, 102 to vendor 101, 201, and so on. So that's the extent of the GL history that we're going to see in the system. I just needed to create some balances to eliminate. So here's our tip now. Remember what I said earlier. What we have to be able to do is to isolate the transactions between entities. I'm going to go one last time back to templates. So I've decided to create a report that will show me all those balances. And so this is the account groups I created, one each for the 4 books. So this is just the GL accounts, the inter-entity GL accounts. It's kind of a trial balance that's been customized to include only inter-entity accounts. We're excluding every other account to track outside party transactions. So each of these consolidation books has its own unique list of, I call these elimination accounts, the accounts to eliminate. So if it's a consolidation of the 100 entities, we're stopping short of the 200 and 300. We're only picking up the 100, 101, and 102 GL accounts. Down here, we're only picking up 200, 201, and 202, and so forth. Up here for the top level, we're including all GL accounts that need to be consolidated at the top level. So having created those account groups, I've then created some reports. Let me look at this one first. So this is the report to show me the balances that need to be eliminated when consolidating my 100 entities. Okay, so here's where we identify the entities. 100, 101, and 102 are getting consolidated. These are the GL accounts tracking the activity between those three entities. So these are the amounts that should be eliminated. I've got that same type of report for the top level elimination. So this is going to be all GL accounts attached to all 7 entities here. So here's where we identify the entities and columns, and then the GL accounts that we have to isolate balances specifically between 2 entities. Okay. We talked about the eliminating entries offset account. So I've kind of designed this to work exactly the way it works when you have a consolidation module. When you run consolidate in those modules, what Intacct does is it's like it's preparing an entry 1 column at a time. Okay. So this column obviously does not balance, but the combined total does. If your combined total does not show 0 here at the very bottom, then you need to do some more work on reconciling your intercompany accounts, okay? Because whatever this number is here, that will be the consolidated balance in this eliminating entries offset account. So for each of these entities here to have a balanced eliminating entries journal entry, Intacct is just zeroing out each of these amounts one at a time. And I hate to use this word, but it's plugging an amount to make the entry balance. And that entry is getting plugged to that eliminating entries offset account. That's this account right here. It should be an equity account. It's non-closing balance sheet account with a normal credit balance. Okay. It's really a moot point because it's going to hopefully have a 0 balance at all times. Okay. So here's the neat little trick we can do. This is the change in balance or the activity for the month. So this is the current month reporting period. We're expanding by that entity group that includes all 7 entities. And when we get the report here, we can run this report now to Excel. When you have it in the Excel spreadsheet, you can use this little journal entry import template that I created with some lookup formulas. It's really neat. I'm just going to take those rows and I'm going to copy and I'm going to insert them into my eliminating entries general ledger journal entries import templates. I'm going to insert those rows right here. And once I do that, then I have a tab for each of my eliminating entries journals. Okay. And I've just created these. I'm skipping that one because I'm not rolling up anything in 300. So I've just got these set up as lookup formulas here. So this is an entry on 200's books to eliminate the activity with 201 and 202. 201 and 202. Down here, 201's entry is just eliminating balances with 200 and 202. 200 and 202. And then the last entry is for the last entity in that consolidation, 202. So it's eliminating balances with 200 and 201. 200, 201. So that's consistently here as well. You got entries for the 100 consolidation entities. And then you have entries for the top level. So I've got all 70 all 7 entities here with some additional entries that eliminate the balance with the entities outside of its own multi-level consolidation, that second level. So these are the transactions with the other entities, the 200s and the 300s. Down here, 200 is eliminating with the 100s and 300s and so on. Okay. So what I've done over here, this combine tab, and you'll notice here, see this template, you identify that journal that those entries should be posting to. So this keeps it separate from your accrual book. These are those eliminating journals here. So I bring all of these individual entries into one journal entry import template so that I can just save this template as one file, which I'm going to do now. This is my June activity. And so now what I'm going to do is navigate to my journal entries screen, which I like this feature now. We can import from our journal entries list view without having to go to the setup checklist for those links. So I will go out there now and look for that CSV import file. So there it is right there. I will click import. So I brought in 13 eliminating entries. So now I will refresh this list here, this trial balance of intercompany balances, if you will, to prove to you that all of those did eliminate. So now we're down to, for the month of June, no longer have a balance in all of these inter-entity accounts. So you can see where in just a few minutes, we were able to knock out all of the eliminating entries for seven entities there. So now we can revisit our reports. Let's look at this single level consolidating statement for 100. So you can see that a balance, an intercompany balance was eliminated, but a balance with an external entity was not eliminated. So that's what you want when you're consolidating 100s. You still want to reflect the balance with 200, right? So you see all of the 100s being eliminated, but everything outside of that 100 range is not eliminated. Okay. So these numbers would tie this column here, the consolidated total. These balances you would expect to see then come up to the top level consolidation as the amounts you see in that first column. Multi-level. So here you go. Those are the amounts we saw on the last report. And now these eliminating entries are eliminating all of those balances between the groups. I guess this would be the groups eliminating entries. So what you have left then is just you got your payroll is left. You've got the transaction with entity 901 that's not part of the consolidation. And that's what you want. You've got income invoices to the outside world is left. So that is what you can do with your core functionality. So I'm going to give this back to Dawn.
Before I pull up the poll question, we did have a question come in the Q&A spot. When should you set up an entity versus location? My company owns and operates multiple orthodontic practices, and we are currently setting up a location and entity for each one rather than just location under one entity.
Okay, location just makes, I would, that's what I would recommend, and I do that. I recommend that the child location correspond to your places of business. So I would continue to do that. All that means is that you're eliminating entries get more granular. It's kind of still the same approach. You're just going to be eliminating balances at the child location level.
Great. And poll question number 3 is up. And I'd like to become a Power Report superhero. Please send me information on the following. And we've got the following to choose from: Interactive Custom Report Writer, Interactive Visual Explorer, Data Delivery Service. And then there's some souls that have said, I'm just not ready to wear that superhero cape yet. So, Mark, if you would stop sharing, and Wes, you could, once Mark has exited, you can share your slides. Then I'm going to end the poll here. I'm really excited to introduce Wes Herms. Wes helps organizations increase finance efficiency, visibility, and control. And I think that that's what everybody is looking for with their financials: control, clarity, and confidence to be able to report on them correctly and to everyone's satisfaction. Wes is a senior account executive at our good partner, Avid Exchange. He earned a Bachelor of Science degrees in Business Administration and Marketing from the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. Welcome, Wes. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Dawn. And thanks to the LBMC team for having me on here today. Hope everybody's doing well. Look forward to just diving in. Sharing my screen here, I just wanted to first, offer my contact details as we kind of get into this here today, but also reiterate that I work very closely with the LBMC team. So they'll remain your main points of contact, but should there be any, follow-up questions or things that may come as a hot topic after I jump off today, wanted to provide some contact information there for you. But as far as my speaking time here today, what I'll be kind of focusing on is how does Avid Exchange, an AP automation provider that integrates well with Sage Intacct, how do we support the overall Intacct structure? How can we help with greater visibility control into the AP and payables process, which inevitably leads to helping streamline that month-end close process as well. So I'll spend a little bit of time just speaking to who's Avid, how do we approach supporting Intacct users, and I'm also going to speak to a client use case for someone that I worked with and who was in a growing organization and how they benefited from the overall implementation of our solution. Moving right into who's Avid Exchange, I like to refer to this as us by the numbers, if you will. So Avid Exchange, like I said, we're an accounts payable automation provider. We've been in business since the year 2000. We're headquartered right out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We were founded here back in the year 2000. And we're well into our 24th year of operation today. We hit a huge milestone back in October of 2021, where we went from being privately held to now being publicly traded on the NASDAQ. And along with that just comes a lot more regulation, a lot more protocols when it comes to things like handling of the data, transactions, and movement of money. So we're a licensed money transmitter. I'll be speaking to some of that as we continue on here, but all in all, our wheelhouse, the bread and butter of Avid is vendor bills, vendor bill payments, and we'll be speaking to how we integrate with Intacct. Now you'll see this next stat: trusted 1.2 million supplier customers. We also have, in addition to once we bring on buyer customers, which would be somebody who's consuming this product day in and day out to drive efficiency, streamline the AP process, we look at all of your suppliers as well as customers. So on the buyer side, we have about 9,000 active users of all different shapes, sizes, different industries, different ERPs. And then as we bring on those new clients, of course, we start interfacing and interacting with all of their vendors. So every client brings on hundreds, if not thousands of vendors. And our vendor network is pushing well over 1.2 million and growing daily. I call that out because both sides of that user experience, whether you're a buyer, customer, like someone on the phone here today, or somebody maybe getting paid or submitting an invoice to this process, both sides of that user experience have different tool sets, different resources, and teams from Avid, their W-2 badged employees, who are there to make their lives easier. We do integrate with over 240 different accounting systems, Sage Intacct being one of the most strategic and more modern cloud-based solutions, and of course, the topic that we're discussing here today. And then the last stat I'll call on this slide is just from an employee count. So we're all US-based, so we're pushing upwards of 1,700 W-2 employees. They're all stateside. Large concentration of these are in our headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we do have 6 offices kind of coast to coast. And then getting into how do we support Sage Intacct users. So first and foremost, like I said earlier, we support the Sage Intacct structure. So Sage Intacct would remain your system of record. And then AvidXchange has established a bidirectional API. So Intacct would be your system of record for things like managing your dimensions, your chart of accounts, your vendor master, your bank account balances. And if you're using purchase orders, you continue to use that purchasing module there, where we can sync all that data over. And then AvidXchange sits outside of the Intacct instance. So we're a web-based, cloud-based solution. And if you really think of this, once we establish the integration, we're somewhat of a front end to the overall AP module within Intacct. So where this process would really kick off is when we capture an invoice from a vendor. And we can set up different vehicles, whether it's coming in via email, whether it's still coming in via paper mail, or whether a client prefers just to simply upload that into our system. Regardless of how that gets into the system, we're then going to leverage technology and human services to accurately pull all the information off and populate it into the necessary fields. So we're pulling invoice level data that we can then build routing rules and different business requirements around how do we funnel this out and route this out to different people in the workflows that we'll establish. And the workflows can be structured a number of ways. There's no limitations. You can customize these as however you need. It can have PO-related expenses where we're doing a 2 or 3 match, or it could be non-PO related where maybe we're setting up an approval hierarchy and then we're capturing review, approval, and coding. The end story of this is getting better visibility across the entire process, capturing the input from different teams, whether it be somebody in AP or finance, or somebody maybe in a department outside of the finance world. And then Avid doesn't charge any user licensing fees. So you'll see a little check mark down there, unlimited users. So if you have folks that are maybe playing a role in AP, providing guidance around approvals because they have a relationship with the vendor, or maybe there's a discrepancy on a PO that needs to be routed out to them for review and for input for the AP team to be able to successfully get things posted, we can communicate through our system, even if all the users do not have a license or access to the financial system. So a lot of front-end capabilities there. One important thing for Intacct users is if you're structured as a multi-entity setup, I know Dawn just fielded a question around that orthodontic practice and whether we set it for locations, do we have it set up as multiple entities? This solution would be able to structure things where, power users, heavy financial users could actually look at everything from a top level view and consolidate the financials and reporting. So any action or data that we're pulling off the invoices or the payments out in the AP lifecycle, we'll be able to report on that at a top level across all entities and locations, or we could even drill this down into entity-specific, location-specific data as well for reporting. And then the user permissions, even like I mentioned, there's unlimited users. So user permissions can then be assigned at the entity level as well. So if you had different, in the orthodontic practice example, if you had different doctors or you had different office managers at different clinic locations, you could have them responsible for reviewing just those types of transactions where someone who's maybe a controller or a CFO wants to see everything across the business. Now, when an invoice comes into this flow, we either match it to a PO or review it and code it. The integration that we have set up will actually look and see what invoices do we have that are fully approved It'll batch those up and then pull them across into Intacct, open up the AP transaction, apply all the lines of distribution and coding, and it'll actually automatically post it into Intacct. So we're alleviating all that data entry. We're alleviating all the potential paper shuffling and chasing to get all the information that needs to go back into Intacct. When you look on the Intact side, you'll see the AP transaction. It'll look as if somebody has keyed that in manually. And then we actually attach a PDF image of the invoice into your Intact environment. So we'll become a document repository in our cloud, of course, but in the Intacct instance, our integration does pull that across. So whether you have a preference to see that on the financial system side, or if you want to see it on the Avid side, it'll be in both locations. And then payments are something that are available as well. So clearly as part of the AP process, you're paying your vendors as the invoices come in. So with this, it's a very flexible approach. You are in the driver's seat to select what payments do you send, when do you send them, what bank account do you want to fund them from. And then in addition, if you want to have a payment approval step, maybe it's an authorized check signer, for instance, who's releasing that cash before it goes out the door. So any of the actions that are being taken across this entire AP lifecycle are going to be recorded from an audit trail perspective, and then you can report on that from an auditing perspective as well. So AvidXchange helps automate the end-to-end process when it comes to AP, freeing up upwards of 70% of the time spent on just the manual day-to-day effort that goes into it, and then the downstream efforts that go into issuing payments out and following up and supporting your vendors to ensure it's cleared. Now, I'll
So I
close
think
here
in
with
the
a
interest of time, Wes,
sure.
if you could advance your slide, Wes has included
Certainly.
a really nice case study that talks about the problem, the solution, the benefit. And this will be included in the slides that I send out to everybody who has registered. And Wes, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to
Certainly.
pull our fourth poll question. And this is around AP automation. So what are your top payment automation priorities as you plan for 2025? So vendor management, payment options, workflow automation, remote accessibility, customer support, and speed of payments. And you can pick more than one here. If you have a couple of these that you'd like to knock off. And remember, if you are here for CPE credit, all poll questions must be answered. All right, I'm going to close this down. The overwhelming selection is workflow automation, which makes a lot of sense based on the stuff that Wes shared with us on how to streamline those workflows and how easy it is and how thorough it is. Wes, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. We'll go back to Mark. Time for release 3 highlights.
Right. Okay. While we've got consolidations on our mind, well, that's on the next slide. So just a reminder that after today, you can look forward to November 8th for the 4th release of this year. So what we'll be talking about today was released, I guess, back on the 9th, almost 2 weeks ago. So while we've got this consolidations fresh on our minds, the first thing that caught my attention as far as a new release feature is applicable to all companies that have subscribed to one of these 3 modules here: domestic consolidation, global consolidation, or this brand new advanced ownership consolidation. So This is a feature that allows you to, for whatever reason, that you need to remove a consolidation book. You may not have set it up like you wanted to, just don't need it anymore. Whatever reason, Intacct likes you to remove a lot of that clutter. And so they have created a feature that allows you to click on that delete button right next to the consolidation book, and you can go about your business. You don't have to wait for it to finish. You can remain productive. In the core environment, though, what we're talking about, if I were to try to delete these books, I would get an error message that says you can't delete the book. There's transactions in it. It's kind of the general rule throughout the system. If you've got objects linked to each other, Intacct usually won't allow a deletion. So I have to go then to the eliminating entries journal and delete there. General ledger. It's kind of like you have to remove it in the reverse order that you added it, right? So if I click that delete button here, it's going to give me another message that says you can't delete the journal because there's transactions in it. So you can see how that could be a little time consuming to go in one at a time to all these journals and then delete the journal and then delete the book. So that's the time you're saving with this new feature if you're subscribed to those modules. So the way I approach the new release is I read the notes and I try to make note of anything that just seems to jump out at me as far as maybe a theme, or what are the areas that Intacct seems to be spending most of its time on, most attention, areas of focus. And so for this release, I identified 5 categories, I guess I would say. The first, and to me, I guess, is exciting that they're still doing this loyally. The ideas from customers, I found, I think, 6 of those. So what are those? That's where you as a user go out to the Intacct community and you submit an idea for a new feature, something that improves the way you use the system, makes you more efficient, or you relied on that function in your previous accounting system, perhaps, and you want to see that now come into Intacct. So these are ideas that Intacct tells us that if they get high vote counts, so your idea as submitted will be voted on by other users. By the way, that reminds me, I wanted to recommend that if you are submitting those suggested improvements to the system, I highly recommend that you first search the idea database there based on some keywords in the function you're after, and look for some ideas that might already be out there and gaining in vote total. You don't want to split your vote, if you will, by creating a whole new idea. It'd be better just to go ahead and maybe add a comment to provide some clarification or some additional description of that key idea or the main idea, and go ahead and continue to vote on those existing ideas so that the count can be driven up, and hopefully those will be given future consideration. So ideas from customers, about 6 this time around. I think, as most companies are, artificial intelligence is a big deal these days. So there are several features that involve artificial intelligence, AI. The interactive custom report writer is getting very popular. That's that module that I guess I would say replaces the core custom report writer. It's more of an interactive. That's why the I is there, interactive custom report writer. So there's an additional license cost to that module. So in the release, they're continuing to add reports in a library, so available for you to use on day 1 there. So interactive custom report writer. And then industry solutions. I see a lot of that going on, especially as we learned about Misty a while ago. construction is a industry solution that Intacct seems to be focused on now in real estate, as Dawn said. We had in the past, we had healthcare and not-for-profits that got special or some more attention there. And then Intacct is always wanting to expand its reach into other countries. Okay, so this slide shows us the first idea. This is interesting. This is actually a connector for a third-party software that focuses on the housing data systems software, Canso software, I guess is what it's called now. It's interesting. I would have had no idea that there were that many users of the system that are in the public housing industry, public housing and tenant lifestyle. So that's what Canso does. So by a connector, what we're talking about is the ability of that third-party software to write transactions via an API to the transactions in Intacct directly. Then, in other words, it doesn't involve an import template to get that data into the system. So that's the first customer idea. And then these five. I don't have an example of this in my demo company, so I'm going to take you to this release note here to show you what we're talking about. So everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with the list view of posted payments. You now have a link in this column on the far right that says unapply. It's kind of like voiding the payment. You see void here as well. It's kind of like voiding a payment, but these are payments that did not involve a check. So these were just where you had available credit and you were able to pay using the available credit. So if you want to free up that available credit to apply elsewhere and reestablish the underlying documents, you now have that capability. I think that was a good idea that came from users. And I'm going to show you this in the note as well, customizing the discount. So sometimes, I hope this doesn't happen too often, but sometimes you will receive a payment from a customer who waited too long to put that payment in the mail to comply with that term that allows a discount if they pay early. So you get it and it's late. So because those are pretty immaterial amounts, I suppose, most of the time, Intacct is giving you the ability to go ahead and honor the discount, even though the term has expired, if you will, for purposes of calculating a discount. So now you can go ahead and override and enter and go ahead and honor, eat the discount, if you will, because it really didn't meet the criteria. But you can enter that discount to apply at the time you post the payment. It's another idea that came from the users. These last three are applicable to one of the focus industries here, construction. And so you're familiar with the user type project manager. So the idea from the community was, why not have a user type construction manager? So that's a good idea that came from you as well. So now you'll see when you're creating a user, you can assign that construction manager type to give that user similar access to what a project manager would have. This one up here, project manager. That would be the projects module. This is the construction module. Same type of access. All right. So if you're involved in construction, I don't have a whole lot of construction. I don't have any construction experience, but we were listening to Misty in our internal presentation last week tell us about what this is doing here. So to avoid a situation where subcontractors are not getting paid by the general contractor. Sometimes the recourse that a subcontractor has is to put a lien on the project, which is not a good thing. So this is an idea that came from the users to say, hey, is there a way that we can print a check that actually lists the names of two companies? So it's a joint payee. That's what they call it in this function. Let me make that a little bigger so we can see it. So the way this works is that uh, this document, this is an invoice, AP bill rather, that might have begun in your purchasing module as a purchase requisition. So this functionality is available to you at the point that that makes its way all the way through the workflow and becomes a vendor bill in the AP module. And when you get to that point, you can edit the AP bill and populate this new tab here called Joint Payees, and you can list the names just like you want them to print on the check. So this will have a payee that will read PG and E and OC, Granite and Stones. And so that's the way they're accomplishing this requirement to pay two parties at one time. The GC is paying or invoicing for the subcontractor's work, and you want to make sure that both get paid. Joint payee. By the way, that becomes then a payment method. So you're going to filter your unpaid bills here to list only those open bills that are subject to a joint payee printed check. And this new payment method will filter that list down to just those. Joint check. Pretty interesting. And by the way, all three of these, I think there's only visibility to these features if you are subscribed to the Sage Intacct construction application. And I think that's true because this one here kind of reminded me of what's already available in purchasing. It's called advanced processing. Y'all might remember that. So this is just another way, if you're subscribed to construction, that you can combine into for example, this invoice document. You just need to get a check or a payment entered into the system from a contractor that has invoiced you for line items or multiple other POs as one invoice. So you're going to go out and grab from these open documents, even down to the line level if you need to, and bring those into one invoice document so that you can create a payment and send that on. To me, it just sounds very similar to what advanced processing does in purchasing. But this would be functionality you would have visibility to if subscribed to construction. Might be a little more efficient. So those are the customer ideas that released in R3. There you go, Don.
We're up to another polling question already. All right. Think back. How long have you been an LBMC Technology Solution client? 2 years or less, 2 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 to 20, more than 20. I know that we have customers that have been with us for more than 20 years. I don't think, based on the responses coming in, none are on this call. But um, it looks like you're a mature bunch. You've been customers from 6 to 10 years, the majority. And we even have a handful who have been with us for 11 to 20 years. So we appreciate your business. It's our pleasure and honor to work with you. And we're so glad that you're here at Hot Topics today.
Okay. Let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence. So in prior releases, we were introduced to the AP automation. All that's going on with AP automation in this release, it's basically just the announcement that that functionality is now generally available for all regions. So you can visit that release note if you want to learn more. If you've been to our prior presentations, you've probably learned all that you need to know there. So taking it to the next phase, the purchasing workflow, what's going on with this release is a new adopter program, early adopter program. So what this functionality is doing is the AI is learning based on what you do at this new list view. So there's a new list view. Everything that was scanned or received by email that was forwarded on or uploaded directly to Intacct, that AP automation we were talking about, Intacct is going to list all of that type of transaction activity in a separate list view. And then you will be able to review what Intacct's best guess was as to how those documents were coded. And so you'll have an opportunity here then to say, hey, you totally missed it on this one. I'm going to make some changes. And based on the changes that you make, or if you accept it as is, that will, this is the definition of AI, I suppose, that will then become part of that learning process here. So Intacct, hopefully over time, will become smarter and smarter, and you will be able then to not have to make these repeated changes over and over again. It will learn the correct way of coding those documents when they come in the future. So that's what's going on. It's an early adopter program for the matching piece here. So this is where Intacct is trying to say, okay, I've received an AP bill directly. I want to go take a look at the documents that are open in purchasing and see if I can go ahead and associate those two, one with the other. And that saves you from having to convert those one at a time. So that's going to be nice if it makes our job easier. I'm a big fan. I said this last week. I'm a big fan of AI if it helps us to save time, AI that is, so that we can be productive in other ways, maybe have increased responsibility. I don't like the idea of AI taking people's jobs away. I'm just not a big fan of AI in that sense. But if AI can just make us more efficient and allow us to be more productive and take on more responsibility, I think the human component should be where the ownership lies. Who is ultimately responsible? It should be some human being, not an AI component. So that's the early adopter program. And I think you have, in that release note, you'll have a way to sign up for that. So look for that link as well. All right. So Sage Intelligent Time, this is an embedded, used to be an assistant that lived kind of outside of Sage Intacct, but it was like a connector, if you will. It wrote timesheet records, and now it has been brought in as the embedded functionality called Sage Intelligent Time. So what's the artificial intelligence that's involved there? So I'm going to I'm going to show you a screen that um, deals with this functionality. It's supposed to be more specific as to what gets created in the timesheet entry. So this is the external assistant, but it will look similar. I just didn't have an environment where I could show you what these activity cards look like. So this is an activity card right here. I have a connection with my Outlook calendar. So anytime I schedule a meeting, this assistant creates an activity card for me automatically. It knows that, hey, you're going to incur some time here that you might want to drop into a billable charge code or whatever. So that's real easy to do. You drop it onto a row here, and the descriptions will be generated with AI. They'll become more specific. That's all I know about this new release, is that the titles and descriptions will be more specific than they have in the past. So hopefully that's something that would be useful to everyone. Activity cards automatically generates descriptions from those activity cards. By the way, the other sources, email. So mine's connected to calendar. My email used to be connected. I think it's just in the process of being embedded into Intacct. So I've lost some of that functionality. Emails, Intacct logs. So if you're spending time in a conversation with a customer, you can use those activity cards and drop them into billable projects. Even the loading and saving of files on your C drive can be tracked with the Sage Intelligent Time Assistant. So it's able to track that. It'll tell you the file name that you were working on, how much time you spent with that file opened. It's a pretty interesting idea. I don't think I've yet seen it in full-blown use yet. I'm looking forward to that, though. Okay. Here's another early adopter program. It's basically it's basically what's going on up here with AP, but it's instead expense reports. So an employee can email or scan, upload their expense receipts to Intacct directly, and Intacct will automatically create those time expense entries for you. There's a link to the release note to learn more about that. Early adopter. And then here's a pretty much a full-blown paperless office offering if you're subscribed to construction. So that's pretty unique to that module, but that will be kind of a central repository, if you will, for all kinds of things, contracts, your bills and invoices and so on. I suspect there might be a time when that might be available with your core functionality. Don't know for sure, but could be. Is that? I don't need that anymore. Okay, ICRW. So seems like every release, this library gets bigger and bigger. With this release, with that focus on construction, we see several, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 new reports related to your construction module. New reports for purchase order, a couple there. Kind of read what they do, each of those. And then order entry has some new reports. I've got a link for you to see where we stand now as far as a complete list of reports this is the ICRW reports library. So if you're subscribed to ICRW, these are available out of the box for you to take advantage of and to use. Got several for AP module, AR, and cash management. This industry solution is growing in the list of what's available there. Contracts. GL, inventory and order entry, and so on. So it's a long list of custom reports, really expands the standard reports offered in the core modules. But ICRW does require an extra license. Now, this is a kind of a work in progress here. I like what they're doing here. They've begun this further explanation with the construction reports. I'm going to drill into here to show you what I mean. So for each of these reports, it gives you some information about the report to give you a good idea if that's a report that will give you information that you're looking for. So every report is listed here with all the information that will be available to you when you run those reports. So this will probably grow to include, you don't see anything yet for order entry. So it's a work in progress. That's what I meant. I think they'll probably list each of those categories. Those modular lists will ultimately end up in one of these further explained pages. That'll be good information. All right, still with ICRW. So you'll probably remember that the custom report writer in your core license, the way that works is you begin with an object and then you kind of branch out from that object to find fields in other objects that you want to present in the columns of your custom report. Your list views within Intacct are fields that just live in that one object. AP bills, for example, you only have the fields that live in the AP bills object. But with custom report writer, you can create columns to include data in fields of other objects that are related to that AP bill object. So it's kind of like taking that list view and giving it steroids. And then when you get the ICRW application, that is more geared around this idea of a reporting area. And so reporting areas correspond to the objects in the system. And for this release, they tell us that there are some more reporting areas available now for this fixed assets management. Now that's the embedded fixed assets module.
Mark, your volume dropped a bit. Um, did your headset get moved or did you move?
I did not move. Can you hear me better if I get closer?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not actually wearing a headset, but I'll try to speak louder. I have a tendency to get soft voice. So I'll try to speak louder. Thank you, Dawn, for letting me know. Okay, so you'll notice here the new reporting area titled assets. It's going to correspond to the fixed asset and classification objects, which you see listed down here. Okay, fixed asset classification. Okay. So just new reporting areas. If you're subscribed to ICRW, you should see those available to you now. And if you subscribe to fixed assets after the embedded version became available, then you will have access to these 3 new reports for the fixed assets management module. You have the external, it's a SIG product that most of you all probably have. I think that's what you'll continue to use. There you go, Dawn.
All right, it's my turn again.
Yes.
And we are on to poll question number 6. I am interested in being the subject of a customer success story. Yes, we love LBMC and have seen great results with Sage Intacct. Yes, but we'd like to get a few more closes under our belt, so maybe in a month or so. And then the last option is we're not ready yet. We would love to. You saw that Wes had included a mini case study on a veterinarian practice that they had implemented a solution for. And we would love to be able to showcase your organization in a similar fashion, give you the spotlight. So thank you for answering that. I'm going to close down the poll here. Please place your answer and hit submit. And it's back to Mark.
Okay, thank you. All right. For this, I guess the announcement in this release, y'all are probably already aware of the beta that's going on for our list views. It's just called enhanced lists. And there's a couple of these I actually want to show you in the system. So I'm going to go over to our not-for-profit sales demo and take you to this first one. I'm going to go to the general ledger chart of accounts. And the reason I showed this to our consultants last week is because there's a function, or the enhanced list view gives us the ability to do something we've been wanting for a very long time. We're human, we make mistakes when we import your chart of accounts, and sometimes we need to redo that import. But it was a real pain to get rid of the chart of accounts that we imported. We had to delete those accounts one at a time. So you can imagine if there were hundreds or maybe even thousands of GL accounts, that was a real pain. So in the beta list view for the GL accounts, you'll see the ability now to do a bulk delete. That may not be something that you all get excited about at this point, but that was really exciting for us. And then there's another list view that's similar in the way that that functionality is available, and that's with reporting periods. These are just some lists that we are involved in as implementers of your system. And we have over here reporting periods. So here's another opportunity to do a bulk delete. I have on occasion imported from a template that Intacct actually provided for us to bring in these reporting periods from a template. I have never wanted to, but accidentally a few times have imported 20 years worth of future accounting periods. And that's just a very cluttered list when you're looking at your reporting periods drop down when you're selecting a reporting period. So I always choose not to bring in more than maybe 2 future years to avoid that long list. It's a long list because the periods that are furthest out in the future are listed first. So you have to scroll way down. So this was a nice feature that allowed us to kind of redo that import as well. So expanded list, that actually is not a beta list view, but kind of a similar idea with bulk delete. Let me go back to, so again, the way you get to those lists here is to, you'll see the link up here, top right, turn on the beta interface. So this beta program is going to last as long as it takes to get all lists. You'll see down here, ultimately, this functionality will be available for all list views in the system. So this is where they are at this point in time. Okay. This is a very small new functionality, but it caught my attention because I did remember there were some of my implementation projects where when we were talking about document sequencers, that some of our customers really liked the idea of creating a sequence format that included the year as a segment, let's say. And those IDs, unless they are created for contracts or this fixed asset management embedded product, those will all require that you manually go into those sequence IDs and edit that segment that includes the year. Well, this caught my attention, even though that the release only deals with the fact that this fiscal year rollover, this is an automatic rollover. You're not required to go in and edit that year or to increment it another year. It's just going to happen automatically. This release just tells us that this auto rollover is now applicable for this what's called an accounting sequence. This probably will not impact anybody on this call, but some countries require a sequence ID for every single transaction. So if that's the case, if you're in one of those countries or regions that require that, this year segment can be part of that ID, and it will automatically roll over at the end of the year and at the beginning of a new year. But I want to mention it because it appears to me that this might be functionality that will apply to sequence IDs that we might create for all modules, okay? Because they have it available to you in the contracts module for sequences that you create for those transactions, and also for fixed assets management. So maybe we'll see in future releases functionality available in the other modules. That would be a time saver. Won't have to edit those IDs every year. Okay, and I titled this Basic Contract Tracking. I don't think that terminology is actually used, but I just wanted you to think about that separate SKU that already exists for basic project tracking. So what is that, basic project tracking? That's the idea that, hey, I don't want to subscribe to the projects module, which includes that extra dimension called projects. What I would really like is to have just an additional dimension called projects, just for reporting purposes, tagging transactions with a project. And so there is a separate SKU'd offering by Intacct called Basic Project Tracking. And so in this release, we have something similar to that called Basic Contract. Well, it's not called Basic Contract, but same idea. You can get this additional dimension called contracts. If you're subscribed to contracts, you already see this. And I guess the only change in that scenario is that you make a choice when you're adding to your list of contracts on the type of contract you're creating, just a reporting dimension only, or if it's going to be a contract that you will use in the contracts module. So you'll decide at the time you add a record to that contract list view. Unfortunately, this is not a separate SKU like basic project tracking is. To get just the dimension only contract, you still have to subscribe to order entry revenue management. So I'm hoping that one day there will actually be a basic contract tracking, but today, to get the extra dimension, you still have to subscribe to something. It's either revenue management or contracts or both. That's the way to get the contract dimension.
All right. Second to the last poll question coming up. And it is, would you like to take a closer look at Sage Intacct inventory? Yes, specifically how it works for nonprofit organizations. Yes, specifically how it works for healthcare organizations. Yes, how it works for commercial business. Um, we are having in September Linda Pinion from Sage Intact and our president, Brian Wilton, will be giving a webinar on inventory for healthcare organizations. And then in October, Linda and Brian will be back to be doing a webinar on inventory in nonprofit organizations. So watch your inbox for invitations to those events. And I'm going to end the poll and turn it back to Mark.
Okay. I think this is my last slide, so we're coming up on the top of the hour here real soon. So I was just trying to be a little cute here, Rosette. So with the Olympics having been in Paris, you might have signed up for Rosetta Stone if you were going to the Olympics to learn French. I know I would have probably wanted to know a few ways of communicating there, Rosetta Stone. But I just asked the question, how can I supplement that learning of French? And really the release is not for French, but you'll see in the environment here, in your preferences, you can choose another new language here. Down here to where we have, so French, it was already here. This is the new language, German. So here's your global reach with Sage Intacct. So now we have the 4 English options, French, and now German. So when you choose one of these languages, what happens? Well, obviously your user interface, you'll see everything with that language. The Intacct online help becomes that language. The community becomes that language. Now, choosing a language here doesn't in any way change the currency. I forgot to mention that last week, but that's controlled another way. You have to subscribe to the foreign currency functionality, but this is just changing what you're reading on the screen. So if you want to get really good at your French, you might practice that by reading your screens. You know what was there in English, right? You pretty much memorized that, so you can see the French translation to kind of better learn those languages. Kind of cool. And I also want to mention before I leave, just keep in mind that there will not be a way to change the terminology for those languages. That's not an option. You only have the English options for customizing the terminology of those labels you see in the system. I guess just translating to the language is customization enough right now in Intacct's opinion. All right, how do I assign a role? So in the system, you might have noticed that already since it's been out for 2 weeks. Normally, we would go to our users in a role-based permissions environment, and we would select a user here. We would edit. And there used to be a roles tab here now, but they've dropped that tab into the first tab. So you'll see now that role assignment down here. And this is also where you see that. This is where you'll see that new construction manager listed here is another radio button. So no more roles tab in user information. All right, how to avoid it.
Mark,
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and launch the last poll question as we're coming up to the top of the hour,
Okay,
just in case someone has a hard stop. I apologize for
that's okay.
interrupting.
That's fine.
So it's our last poll question. And I'd like more information on Sage Intacct Payroll. A few weeks back, we had a little mini webinar on Sage Intacct Payroll, and we saw a lot of excitement around the product. If you were unable to attend that, it was recorded and it is up on our YouTube channel. But if you'd like to learn more, indicate that here. If you're not the payroll person, I can send you some information and you can pass it along. So a couple more minutes for folks to answer here. And then we'll let Mark finish this out. And I'm sorry that I kind of broke the train of thought here.
That's it.
All right, I'm going to end the poll, so please submit your answers. Okay, back to you, Mark.
Okay, I want to take you very quickly to the posted payments list view. And this is where you'll also see, in addition to those unapplied links, you'll see a new link now to void. This is, I guess, the whole column is new. Used to, you had to go to the check register or bank register to void payments. So maybe one of these days we'll see void payments actually listed on the menu. But today, this is your next best way of voiding payments by going to the list view, posted payments. Okay, and then I'll skip over that one. We've already talked about reporting periods. And then if you're subscribed to the Sage Intacct planning application, they've given you a new way to load up that external system by going to your budgets menu and this budget planning menu. And now you have a link that will just open up that module directly from within Intacct. So, and that gets me, Dawn, to the last polling question, which you
Which
just.
we've already done. Great. Well, Mark, thank you very much for your presentation today. And in another 3 months, we'll be back here with hot topics and release 4 highlights. Thank you all for joining us today.